there. I'm Cassidy Cash. I have a background in English from the University of Montevallo. I also hold a master's degree in information engineering from UAB. I'm a member of the Renaissance Society of America, the Shakespeare Association of America, the International Shakespeare Association, and I was recently named Associate Fellow of the Royal Historical Society in London for contributions to history. So that's my history foundations there, and especially my Shakespeare foundations. I started that Shakespeare Life back in 2018. We launched on April 23rd, Shakespeare's birthday, and we have grown to be the number one Shakespeare history podcast in the world, as ranked by two different platforms at this time. So that's pretty exciting. I've had my research published in different places. You may have seen me. I also have done 3-minute animated versions of Shakespeare's plays. And I like to present history at Shakespeare conferences as well as to different historical groups. I'm a big fan of card games. You'll see a lot of historical card games floating around on our platform. Today, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about who I am, what I do, and what you can expect here on That Shakespeare Life. We have a lot of new people, so I wanted to dive in and explain what you're going to find when you hang out here with us each week. The first pillar of what I believe about Shakespeare and Shakespeare history is that Shakespeare's plays are entertaining and fun. They are not boring and they are not too old for people to understand. They're certainly not as hard as people have, I guess, been led to believe or that he's been made out as from several different directions. That's why every Wednesday we have a Weird Word Wednesday segment here on YouTube where I explore some of the words in Shakespeare's plays that are now obsolete. And we make fun of them and we laugh along with them because some of them are quite silly. But these are just designed to help make his stories more accessible. You don't have to stumble over the words to really get into the play. And I hope that that helps in that way. Ironically, in helping Shakespeare's plays be more accessible, one of the questions I get asked most often from people is asking me to recommend a first play experience for their incredibly young children. Often it's from mothers with elementary age kids and they want to know, where should I take my kids to Shakespeare first? And they're talking to me about their 8-year-old. And in my response, most people are rather shocked or even confused, and you might be as well, because I'll say that if it were Shakespeare's plays, if they were a movie today, would most certainly be rated R, or at the very least PG-13. There are no G and PG rated Shakespeare plays that I'm aware of. And if you wouldn't take your kid to see an R-rated film, I really don't suggest that you see an original production of a Shakespeare play. I think that because Shakespeare was, or I think Shakespeare was long ago absorbed into the literature department, and a lot of people, because the language is old, a lot of the rude, macabre, and adult references kind of slide past people because they skip them, right? They don't understand the words and they just skip over that. I don't know what that means, so just ignore it. And there's this combination of thinking that Shakespeare belongs alongside Charles Dickens or Jane Austen's for this classic literature content your kids should be exposed to at all ages. And instead, I believe that Shakespeare's history and the history of the 16th century can absolutely be tailored to all ages, and especially to elementary age kids. But the plays themselves are really adult content. I wouldn't recommend the real Shakespeare plays to young kids ever. The exception might be Much Ado About Nothing, but again, if you study the history of that play, even the word nothing is a rude joke. So for myself, I didn't take my kids to see Shakespeare plays on stage until they were in high school. Before that age, we talk about the history of this time period. They've definitely been introduced to William Shakespeare because they hear me recording things like this down the hall. And we would look at modified or abridged versions of some of the plays well before high school, but the full undiluted Shakespeare plays are definitely for older kids. I would say they're just, high school would be the earliest, but even college and adults is really what Shakespeare is for. Which brings me to my next pillar of this platform, and that's that Shakespeare isn't literature, and we should put a fine point at the end of that statement. And I say this, of course, as a category because Shakespeare did write sonnets, and okay, the sonnets are poems, and that belongs in the English department because it's poetry, and okay. But the plays themselves were scripts, and I think it's important to remember this, especially if you're coming across Shakespeare as something educational. You should remember that they weren't designed to be read. They weren't even designed by William Shakespeare to be read as a book. He benefited from a rather new memorial cultural tradition where your friends and neighbors or fans would compile an author's work into a folio after they died. And of course, Shakespeare has the first folio of 1623 that brought together all of his works, but that wasn't a decision that Shakespeare made himself. For Shakespeare himself, he was writing stories like Macbeth and Hamlet and Twelfth Night, all to be performed on stage. And I tell people this all the time. If you would think it was weird to hold a film class and tell your students to read through Spielberg's script for E.T. or some of his other famous movies instead of having them go and watch that film. And if that sounds strange to you, or like you would have been missing out on something to only read the script and not see the movie, that's the same disadvantage you're doing someone studying Shakespeare when you read the play Macbeth instead of seeing it on stage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I can't go back to the 16th century. So am I not, missing something if I don't just read the play? Well, then I'm getting the pure Shakespeare, right? Well, I take such issue with this. And here's why. Performance adds context, costume, lighting, and other cues that help the language of the dialogue of the plays make more sense. They help you follow the pace of the story, they help you see what's going on, and it's a much more powerful experience as it was designed to be. And even when you have different directors that take creative license with how to stage Shakespeare's original words, you're getting the Shakespeare experience because the actors from the 16th century would have had the same creative license as directors and actors and production companies do today. If you were to go back to 1595 and sit down and see a play from, well, or stand, I suppose, in the gallery and in the, what's it called? Brains failing me. Groundlings area. I knew it would come to me, of the globe, and you're standing there to see a performance, no two productions are going to have been exactly the same because whether you're at the Globe or you're at Whitehall Palace or you're traveling around and doing it in different inns and taverns of different places that traveling companies would often go, the venue, the costumes, the actors, and the way they were performing literally varied by performance. For example, in a script for Shakespeare's plays, you'll often see the stage directions that says simply, "They fight." And exactly how they fight, how long, with what, to what end, who gets hurt, what do they get hurt with, is anybody bleeding? All of this is up to creative license. In Shakespeare's lifetime, this would have been true for their playing companies because playing companies of the 16th century often had a rotating retinue of resources. I didn't mean that to be quite so alliterative, but I like it. But how much props they had, how much people they had, or which people, or which weapons, or what they had available to create, fake blood on stage. They even had rotating space, as we've mentioned. So exactly how much stage space they had to complete a fight scene would have varied. And much of this would have varied by occasion or even been improvisational in the moment. So depending on who was working that day and where, the fight scenes in particular were highly varied. And that's part of what makes it a Shakespeare play. And so when you're relying just on your imagination, it's not that your imagination can't come up with an excellent fight scene. I'm sure it can, but it's just not a substitute for going to the theater. So if there is one place I'm going to plant my flag here at That Shakespeare Life, it's go see Shakespeare in a theater. I think that theater is the best thing to come from humanity after language and the wheel. And Shakespeare did theater the absolute best, so he's worth knowing in this context. Now, I also believe that the plays make more sense when you understand the context of when they were written. And I think that's especially true for Shakespeare because he was so up to the minute with his history. There are references in his plays to things that were happening within the same month of it going on. His plays are much more powerful, and a lot of the references will seem less random when you understand what's going on when he wrote this down, the technologies, the culture, people, events, and just the context of when, and often the science and spacing and smells and sounds of the places where he was staging these plays. When you understand all of that history, the story makes more sense. And you go, oh my gosh, that's why he wrote that. I get it now. And that's why on That Shakespeare Life, our show aims to be incredibly micro-history focused. Our episodes take you behind the curtain and into the real life and history of William Shakespeare. We look at food, costumes, textiles, weapons, cutlery, recipes, and more that are just the pulse of what real life would have been like if you were living when Shakespeare was alive. The more we explore, the more references that would have often been dismissed suddenly seem alive, intentional, and even make an impact on our understanding of Shakespeare's stories. I love to share these connections on That Shakespeare Life, and you'll see us doing that. I'm, if not every episode, yeah, every episode. I believe that history is also best learned by doing. I'm a big fan of whenever I have an education background. I used to teach classes and I teach here in this format today instead. But I love to bring the idea of science labs into history class. And what I mean by that is I try to offer you the opportunity to try out some of the history that you learn about on the show. You'll see that through what's called activity kits or DIY history moments here on YouTube. And there's more expanded versions of these activities available for members of our show, but you get the option to try out a game, a recipe, or a craft from the life of William Shakespeare. Because I think it's always fun when you can connect your history that you're learning to something tangible. And so you'll see that spattered around here on YouTube as well. Also, I am an artist. I think when I define myself, I'm really an artist first. Podcasting is one of the mediums that I work in, but I am also a painter. Currently, I'm painting my way through a list of almost 30 castles I found mentioned by name in Shakespeare's plays. I'm going back to the archives and painting each one based on paintings from the 16th century or sometimes before that. Often it's just, is there any historical image of this painting we can find? And I'll base my illustration on that. I see it as a version of historical preservation to paint castles and old buildings, but plus it's just really fun. It's cool to go and engage with this history and to connect the castle's history to what was going on in Shakespeare's plays and why he might have chosen to mention that particular location by name. And so each of these castle projects, I'm doing one a month. I think I'm up to my fifth castle right now in May of 2026. So it's going to take me probably 2 years to get all the way through all of them, doing one a month. But we'll be exploring the castle, its history, and how it connects to Shakespeare's plays all here on YouTube. And then the prints of the castles I illustrate are available in my Etsy shop as well as on CassidyCash.com. And tell me if you like this idea, but I'm also have a note over here to the side that I would love to create some sticker sets, and they would be basically castle sticker sets. And I'm thinking every 6 castles, I'll just create a sheet of castle stickers that you could use. I'm a big physical planner person. I keep that over here on my desk. And I love to have just little bits of Shakespeare history spattered throughout my planner. So I also thought about putting together some planner stickers. But so that's a little bit inside look at the artsy side of our platform here. Tell me what you think about that. If you like planner stickers too, or you'd like some stickers for Shakespeare's castles, please leave a comment and let me know so I can see that. As an artist, I also take commissions for historical itinerary maps. I'm an illustrated map drawer. That's not the way to say that. I draw historical itineraries for different historical tours. And I love capturing the places that we love to visit. So these are fun as just mementos of here's this area of the world that you got to engage with and you just really loved it and get to bring that back home with you. So you'll see some of my maps available on the website as well. And then, of course, if you're running a historical tour and would like an illustrated itinerary, come find me. That's what I do. In summary, we have new interview-based podcasts here on the pod every Monday. Every Monday morning, we will talk with a leading expert on Shakespeare history to learn more from them what life was like in the 16th century. That goes out everywhere that you get your podcasts, including here on YouTube. And then on Wednesdays, we look into weird words from Shakespeare's plays. And Saturdays, we have a little bit more fun. It's sometimes games, sometimes crafts, and sometimes we just start with a did Shakespeare question. I go investigating something we could find out about the life of William Shakespeare, and I share with you what I'm able to find. We do that here on Saturdays. So if you love all that, please subscribe to the channel and come join us for Adventures in Shakespeare every week. On social media, I will also be posting adventures from all of the background stuff. So if you're on Twitter or Instagram, come and find me there, and I'll be sharing tidbits from the research there as well. So that's me in like a really big nutshell and what I aim to do here with That Shakespeare Life. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye bye. If you like walking around in turn of the 17th century England to see the sights, smell the smells, play the games, and maybe even haunt an old theater or two, then this is the place for you. Hit that notification bell so you can be sure to join us on our next adventure. I'll see you in the next episode.